Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by Bill O'Connell, the Information Security Officer at VHC Health. Bill, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyber, Lynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past theirs. That's where Cyberlinks comes in. We've partnered with the best cybersecurity companies in the world to be able to provide our clients with the best solutions at the best prices. So whether it's managed SIM, SOC, EDR, MDR, XDR, you name it, we'll help you find the best solution at the best price. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyber, Lynx.com. And now back to our show. Bill, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about VHC Health and your role there as Information Security Officer?
Sure. VHC Health is a hospital system in Arlington, Virginia, just outside of DC. I've been with the organization for about 7 years now. Originally, I'm from Chicago. They brought me in from Chicago to help kind of jumpstart their cybersecurity program there.
Very nice. So you're pretty local to us. We're here in Bethesda, so you're not far away.
Yeah, not too far.
That's fantastic. So, one of the things I think there's a couple of things I think that are really interesting and exciting these days. Of course, AI, but I also think zero trust is one of those things that is oh so important, and yet, I think it's not understood well enough, and I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding around zero trust. There's a lot of apps and solutions, and I think it adds to the, I don't want to call it a mystique because I don't think it's very, there's not much mystique to it, more confusion. So let's dive into zero trust a little bit, because I think you're a big proponent, and can you walk us through kind of help the people who are a little fuzzy on it, what it is, how you can communicate this to stakeholders, things like that.
Sure. I mean, zero trust is not so much a specific project that you're going to do. It's a more of a concept. There's a lot of different ways to do it, a lot of different frameworks that will help you get there. And there's some similarities between them. You always want your segmentation of your network, microsegmentation when needed, various access management controls and stuff. But one of the things that I've seen is that a lot of stakeholders think of it as a project. We're trying to do zero trust. Okay, when are you going to be finished? Well, we're really never going to be finished, right? So we're always going to be looking at things. We're always going to be looking to where we can improve it. One of the best analogies that I heard, especially in the healthcare sector, is, healthcare, a hospital, you have to let people in. You have to have those kind of soft boundaries. People can walk in to the front desk. They can walk into a doctor's office. You don't want them walking into a surgeon's room or an operating room or something like that. Yeah. So that's kind of the concept that I use for zero trust. We want to make sure that people that need to have access can get access, but we are restricting them from places that they shouldn't be going, and putting those boundaries in place there.
Yeah, no, I really like that. In fact, I think that's a really great way of kind of explaining it to people. I haven't heard that analogy before, but I think it's just so spot on, because I think everybody gets that, right? That whole doctor's office, reference, or the hospital reference makes perfect sense, right? But then applying that to the digital world, I think it's funny, because all too often when it comes to security, people do have that kind of feeling of, well, when's it going to be done, right? When are you going to, you can't be cyber secure. That's not there's not a state where you're like, hey, we're cyber secure now. We're done. Check. Be like, oh, wouldn't that be nice? So I think that's a really good way of putting it, because it's like, yeah, you've always got to be working on those controls, and how do you keep people from getting back into the operating room. So I really like that. That's great.
Nice.
So let me tell you, or let me ask you, I mean, I think we've had now probably 100 different at least 100 different, CIOs, CTOs, you name it on the show. And I don't think any two have had the same sort of entry into tech, right?
Mhm.
Some knew very early on, some very late in life. So what was it that kind of got you interested in technology in the first place? And how did you go from there to here?
No, it was a long time ago. I was actually a pressman working the old printing presses
Okay.
for an organization that did phone cards and stored value cards, things like that. Um, to be honest, I was pretty bored. It was a good job, but I needed something more exciting, and that's just about when um, Microsoft started coming out with their MCSE. This was NT 4.0 when I got into it. So went to school for that, and when there was an opening in the IT department, I moved over there, and just kind of expanded from there. Started out working on network support and firewalls and VPNs with some of the other like AT&T and Kmart that were doing the phone cards.
Yeah.
And back then, the phone cards weren't activated at the checkout; they were live.
Yeah.
So you'd have like this um, crate of phone cards that was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes.
Yeah.
So it was a interesting place.
Huh. That's fantastic. It's really funny because I think you think back to those days, and it's incredible how far we've come since
Mhm.
those, the Windows NT days. And now, I mean, it's incredible when you start thinking about things like AI. And I mean, back then, even getting the computer to recognize an image. Science fiction, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's like
Yeah.
even creating an image was challenging back in the early days. Like, how do you actually, put graphics on the screen? And it was cumbersome and challenging. And now, we stand on the shoulders of these technology giants, and people are able to, you know, leverage AI to create, images and videos and software, and it's just
Mhm.
fantastic. So I think, one of the things I think is really interesting is AI when it comes to security. And so my yeah, I think this is a really interesting topic that I'd love to dive in with you here because, being the information security officer, I think this is right up your alley. So, one of my new favorite kind of toys, if I'm going to be Oprah, right? Like Oprah's new favorite toys. One of my new favorite ones is Dark Trace. And I don't know if you're familiar but Dark Trace, I think, is super cool because I think it's a sign of what we're going to see in the future. Like when it comes to AI and let's say email, it makes perfect sense. Like instead of like bolting on an LLM onto some email security product, you've got something that is using a self-learning, kind of machine learning to look at the email, understand that, hey, wait, this isn't how Bill writes, or yep, this is how Bill writes. Wait, this URL, it checks out as and it no, not been reported as bad, but clearly I can see that that's a bad URL. This thing's bad. And so I think those are the kind of things where I think it gives us a glimpse into the future of kind of security. And so I think those are really cool. But from your perspective, because we have to live in that now portion of, okay, there's some AI out there, but there's a ton of it. A ton of people bolting LLMs onto things. And it's like, now you've just introduced the ability for somebody to prompt inject, so it's like, was that an improvement? I don't know. Not shooting anybody down, but that's a real thing that people have to be aware of and consider when they're looking at these new cool AI tools.
Mhm.
So, for you, as a security, as being concerned with security, how do you balance this? What is your take on the future of AI and security, and how do you play that now?
So the security of AI, we do run through a third party risk assessment on any kind of new tools. Everybody's got AI. Everybody's claiming to have AI in their tool set now. And some things are more riskier than others. So we try to take a look at that risk. Um, Being in healthcare, of course, one of the biggest things is having patient data being used in um, the learning algorithms for these AI systems and where that data goes after that,
Yeah.
making sure that it's been properly scrubbed or properly anonymized. It was funny. I was reading an article probably about 6 months ago or so where they said that even if data is anonymized and then sent up to AI, there's actually AI agents that can reconstruct that data just from the data that it has out there, right?
Don't doubt it. Yep.
So you're in this cycle where you're trying to protect the data from, something that's useful for you. At the same time, that usefulness can expose that data if used in the wrong way.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really great point and a real challenge, right? With a lot of this stuff. So how do you I suppose it's just good kind of governance, right? Where you look and you ask the right asking the right questions and being focused on, hey, look, where is this data going? When your AI is looking at it and storing it, is it learning from our email and then is it sharing that with everybody? How does this work? So where do you see AI going, when it comes to the future in security? What's your, not that you're a futurist or anything, but from your vantage point, where do you see it from, going from here?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've found to be very exciting is the agentic AI. So this idea of using AI as a resource in
Oh,
a SOC or in some other security situation. Um, Kind of a double-edged sword, though, right? So you have this ability to um, automate a lot of basic, repetitive, sometimes dreary tasks, but at the same time, those are the same tasks that are you're assigning to the new guy so that they can learn things and stuff like that. So it's
yeah,
kind of cutting out that entry level for a lot of people. But yes, it can absolutely take a lot of time and resources off your plate.
yeah.
And I think that's valuable.
Well, I think the challenge, I think for me, the challenge that I see with agents is giving them agency.
Mm.
I'm a little apprehensive, and I love technology. I'm always right there on the kind of the forefront. I think it's really exciting and it's fun for me. And as I age, I think it keeps me young. We'll see as I get into the 70s and 80s if I can, how, if that stays. But I think embracing technology rather than fighting it or kind of giving up at some point, I think is really important, right?
Mhm.
And I think we're kind of seeing that. I think we're kind of in the first generation that kind of grew up with technology, from the old technology, to this modern stuff. And of course, the kids, below us, they're coming up with, they'll never know a world without AI. And that's crazy. Like they don't know what a dial-up phone is. They don't know what, the sound of a modem, not that it's important, but that it's these fun things that they'll never experience. But I think it's really interesting because we see so many people kind of putter out. They like, oh, that was it. They stopped at Windows XP, and you're like, oh, you killing me here. Like you can't do that to yourself, right? And so now it's really challenging because it's going so fast. And so I think it's really easy to become overwhelmed by how much stuff is coming at us with like these new products, these new things, right? And I think the challenge when it comes to AI is exactly that. Like there's so much. How do you choose, where you because you've only got so much time in the day. Everybody's got a
Right.
job to do. You've got families, you've got a life. And then what, you're supposed to spend 12 hours a day assessing new AI products? I don't think so. That doesn't make much sense. So I think that's really fascinating. But from getting back to the point of the agentic I have a real hard time, like, and I think it's maybe because we don't, it hasn't kind of earned enough trust yet, right? And then I worry about when it has earned enough trust, then what, right? But I think, I have a hard time trusting it with any sort of information or autonomy to say, go do that thing. Like,
Yeah.
no matter how basic it is, I'm like, let me really check that work. Whereas the kid that you bring in and you're like, here's, day one on the job. Okay, go ahead and do these things. Cool. It's entry level stuff. You're not too worried about it. You check up on them. Yep. Cool. That's great. I don't feel the same way about, agentic AI. But is that just me?
Well, I think you still have to have the human in the loop on these kind of things, right? So you let the AI agent do certain things, how much you want them to automate that afterwards without human interaction is really a decision point on how comfortable you are with the platform that they're working on. And some organizations, security organizations, have very good security, and there's going to be some that don't. Um, no matter how good you are, there's always going to be a vulnerability that comes in at some point. So it
Yeah.
kind of goes back to zero trust, right? How are you making sure that a bad guy can't get to that platform and compromise it?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you've got these, the LLMs that are now connected to, say, your calendar, so that it can schedule events for you, like, oh, let me schedule that appointment, right? Great. Now it's got access to your calendar, which, if you're not careful, maybe it's also got, access to your email. And if you're not careful, some bad actor who's going to schedule something with you now has access to your email and your calendar, can have them disclose all kinds of stuff. So I think for me, that's where my kind of security mind, I don't want to say worries, but that's where it goes. And it's like, and that's the one we know about, right? We know about those prompt injections, and it's how do you even combat that, right? Because it's, in the current state of these LLMs, as cool as they are and as fast as they're advancing, the bad guys are, they're working overtime to use these for nefarious deeds,
Hmm.
and they're very creative, right? And
Yeah,
they don't have to be right every time. They get to be wrong a million times and right once. Whereas on our side of things, we've got to be right every time. And the one time we're wrong, the bad guys get in. So, we've got a much harder battle on our side. So for me, I'm more reluctant to let, to bring AI to a place where it can interact with other people, because the bad guys are going to be interacting with that. And so then how do you put those guardrails on there to keep your information safe? Even, I don't know. So that's where I run into that challenge for me.
yeah. No, I read about there is a an email um, vulnerability where you could put a um, basically an AI prompt within the email. The email agent that's reading your email to summarize it for you would see that prompt and actually enact, you know,
Yep.
a download, installation, whatever it was, to put a backdoor in your system. You know, those kind of innovative things are pretty scary.
Yeah. And that's why I really like it. So I think for me, I love what LLMs can do. But going back to that, say for instance, that dark trace analogy where you use machine learning for a very specific thing.
Hmm.
Well, now you've avoided that whole prompt injection issue. So it's, for me, it's kind of like using the right fit, the right technology for the right thing. LLM's great for when you want some help writing that email, or hey, look, this is a 100-page document. I've got to summarize, and I've got to know. So you know what? Give me the Cliff Notes version. Boom. Here you go. That's fantastic. I love that stuff, right? And so that makes a lot of sense to me. But just slapping it onto everything, to me, that's the scary future. And we haven't gotten to that, general intelligence, or this, super intelligence. I don't know that we necessarily will, because for me, I'm kind of concerned that, well, we don't really understand how intelligence works to begin with. So,
Right.
for us to be able to replicate it, even if it is just one of these iterative things where, oh, just how we developed it, it just, is it one of these things that it just happens over so many iterations and just kind of happenstance? Maybe you stumble upon it. I don't know. I I don't know. So I'm not convinced that we ever get to that point. And I'm not obviously the smartest guy on the planet. There are people who really believe that we will. Okay, but I think that's something where it makes sense, and you slap that in someplace, because now it's smart enough to know you're not going to prompt inject me, buddy. Like, that's ridiculous. Then we got a whole nother set of problems of this super intelligence that is way smarter than we are. Um, Great. Hopefully it stays good, not evil. Okay, fine. But I think in the meantime, bringing it back to today, the LLM is not the end all be all. And when we're talking security, it's really interesting that what is the right product or the right technology for that use case. And then going in, as you said, asking the right questions. So I think that's really, the best advice people can give because there's so many great, so many cool new shiny, toys out there. That's like, oh, that's really cool. Okay, but let's dig deep.
But you also have to allow the organization to leverage that to stay competitive too, right?
Yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword again. You can't lock things down so much or say no so much from a cyber perspective.
Yeah.
Eventually, people are going to use it regardless. And I'd rather control what they're using, know what they're using, and be able to say, this is okay, but this isn't, rather than them going behind my back and using whatever.
Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, I think early days we were the department of no, right? Security
Right.
was no, can't do that. It's not approved, blah, blah, blah. Everything was no. And I think we've learned as a uh, industry, I guess, to be more y- yes and, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do that. And we also need to explore, how we keep that safe,
Right.
and how we implement that in the right way so it doesn't, become a problem. And I think that in the kind of that future between now and that, you know, super intelligence, I think having the other AI tools that help you see the network better and faster and understand it, better. Like OT is one of these things where it's really challenging. And so for you guys, in hospitals, it's a real vulnerability.
Yeah.
And there aren't a lot of really great solutions out there. I mean, I go right back to Dark Trace. I sound like okay, yeah, I'm a fanboy, but they do it's a really another great example of if you use AI in the right ways, even things like OT, now you get to see all this crazy information in a better way, faster, and then be alerted better than what our traditional methods have. So I think, that's a really good kind of use of that technology in those ways. And so it allows us to say, yes, you can use these things. Sure, bring in that device into the hospital that the surgeon says they need.
Hmm.
Okay, great. It's got, it's connected to the internet or has to connect to the network to feed into the electronic medical records. Great. But as soon as it does that, now you got this foreign device that's now plugged in and it's got, potentially access to all this information. So being able to see that stuff very quickly and be like, wait a sec, why is this whatever rando device in the operating room suddenly, accessing all this information in the EMR or suddenly transmitting a bunch of information, right? So
Yeah. And I mean, seeing it, getting alerts, sometimes that's not going to be fast enough if you're relying on the people. And I think that's where that AI can actually benefit as well, to be able to step in. If you're comfortable, let that AI be able to cut off access or control the access in some way. Now, with hospitals, of course, it can be very risky if you're talking about a um, robot surgeon, for instance, which we
ooh,
have a couple now. Um, we don't want to be cutting that off.
yeah.
It could be in the middle of a very tricky procedure. So it's going to be important that when we do give control, that we give control in as safe a way as possible with enough boundaries and barriers, and again, that human in the loop to make sure that we're not causing any kind of disturbance.
Yeah. I'm not can I totally agree with you. And I can't help but think that in this kind of in the period of AI that we find ourselves now, I think that AI does a great job. I'll throw somebody else out there. Like you look at Sentinel-1 or CrowdStrike. The cool part about the way they use AI is slightly different than the Darktrace way. But
Mhm.
now you get these assessments. Like we'll go with Sentinel-1's. They call it Purple AI. Super cool in that now that you're getting this security alert about this, let's just say it was some software that somebody ran on their computer, and suddenly it's doing something a little weird. And first of all, you probably wouldn't know that and whatever, but it's really great that it can then take that and then using AI, you translate that whole thing into, hey, this is why this is strange and why we thought this, let's say it looks like it's collecting data. So here's what we've discovered, boom, and just have that, that assessment right there in plain English for the technician, be like, oh, well, you know what? Maybe we should look at that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff like that would have stopped the solar winds, issue completely. It would have caught that early on. When you have those supply chain attacks, those are hard for traditional, let's whatever security software to catch because it's like, well, nope, that's solar winds and it's they've got a certificate and that's legit, so I have to say that's good.
Right?
But it's doing bad things.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
good.
No,
Is
I
it?
like we use CrowdStrike here, and that was one of the things that I liked about some of their AI capabilities, um, is giving you kind of a what they call attack path. So it allows for an agent to or AI to present to you an attack chain that may be involving some very low level vulnerabilities that you may not consider as important, but when used in the right way, it can get you right to Active Directory or to the electronic records in a very fast way. Um, it can really shine the light on some concerning um, situations.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a great use of AI. Even if it's, even if on some of those it's, kind of, well, not really. That's not really bolting, an LLM onto it. I mean, maybe in the explanation portion to be able to
Mhm.
say, "Hey, I pieced all these pieces together, and now here it is in kind of human terms, what that means." So I think those are fantastic. And as you look back on things like what jobs that technology took, like let's say the old phone operators, right? Kind of long gone. Nobody misses those. That
Mhm.
wasn't, but obviously now it would be crazy to have somebody that's impossible, right? You can't be connecting phones like that because a billion phone calls a minute go across the planet. It's insane, right? And I think that AI takes us in that direction. I'm not. I'm not holding on to the past, but I just don't think that until we get to that super intelligence, I don't think there's going to be a lot of the great automation. I think it's a really cool idea, but I think there's a very good chance that where we land as a whole is AI is a great tool that lets us do a lot more faster, but it has to have real guardrails on it, and you can't just let it run off, and it can't be a human that interacts with people and makes decisions and takes actions on its own because it's still AI and it doesn't actually understand. It's the world's greatest autocomplete. Let me finish that thought for you. Oh, this is what you meant. It looks really smart. And in many ways, it appears to be, but it's not, it doesn't actually understand what it's saying and doing. It's just piecing it all together. Do we, or is that what's happening with us? Do we actually know? Are we just like great autocompletes? You know?
Well, I mean, AI, a lot of the disruptions that happened in the past, going back, I don't know, um, like some of the fabric um, automation, even the automobile. These were all very specific, solving a very specific problem. The thing with AI is it can do so many different things. We're not talking about replacing a single industry or a single job or job function. We're talking about something that can broadly change many, many jobs, many, many industries. And it is being used throughout many industries. Um, Electronic switching. took out the old operators. Well, AI can do that and a dozen other things, 100 other things at the same time.
Yeah. No, and I think that's what ends up being scary for people.
Mhm.
But I think it's going to, as we've seen with all technology, it ends up creating so many more jobs than it
Mhm.
ends up destroying, right? The microwave didn't put, it didn't change the way that we cook. We don't suddenly stop using the stove and what that's just great.
Yeah.
We're able to heat stuff up faster. The
Mhm.
computer didn't, and the internet. I mean, look at how many jobs the internet has created. And with AI, it's going to be that times, 100. So it's going to get us there. But like you said, the low level, easy to automate jobs, yeah, sure. But that's
It's
good.
about continuous learning, as a person, AI will make redundant a lot of jobs. The people itself, that's a choice on their part, whether they relearn or reskill whatever that is required. And I know for some people it's hard and they're not going to do it. But for the people that do, that learn how to either reskill to something that isn't controlled by AI or can't be replaced by AI, or people that learn how to use AI to make themselves better, do their own job better, those are the people that are going to benefit in the long run.
Well, I completely agree. And I think this, one of the things that I like about AI and how it can help people is when it comes to analysis, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's a skill that people should really work on, and I think AI can be a great assistance in that. So I'm kind of curious, like for you, it's been one of those things that you've worked on, in your career, but how do you help your team kind of build those analytical skills?
So, I mean, one of the things I always push with my team, all levels, right? When they're looking at a problem, they're trying to figure out what really the root cause of a problem is. So many people stop too short. They'll look a couple times, they might get to a couple of symptoms, and they're like, "Ah, I'm done. Here's the root cause." Um, if you have, let's say, a power surge that takes out a service or a server, and nobody notices it, right? And something happens a week, 2 weeks later. Uh, when they go to do that root cause analysis, you have to keep digging. When you get to the point where, oh, it's a power surge that stopped the service, and then they stop. Well, that doesn't give you something that you can solve at that
Yeah.
point, right? Uh, where was the next step? What caused the actual outage, and how could that be prevented for the next time? That's where you get your lessons learned in.
Yep.
So in a case of a service or a server that went out because of a power surge and wasn't detected for a week, when you dig down deep enough, the real problem is that it wasn't detected.
Yeah.
You have to have some method of monitoring, whether that's simple email or you know get into an AI. There's AI apps now that will fix that problem for you. But whatever that is, you have to dig deeper. So like I'll do use some of the basics with my team. I'll teach them five whys type of thing, right? You just keep asking, well, why did that happen? Um, the people couldn't log into AD. Well, why? Well, because the time was different between the AD server and the workstations. Well, why? Well, because the network time service was crashed. Well, why? Because of the power surge. Well, why wasn't it discovered? Why didn't we know about it for a week? Well, because we didn't have monitoring. So, I mean, you can go down as far as you can till you get to something that you can actually fix that
Right.
will prevent it or at least reduce that chance for the next time.
Now, you called it the five whys. Is that something you found, like you go basically five levels
Yeah,
tends to be like the root,
well,
or
it doesn't have to be five, but
all right.
yeah, that's where it came down. And I may be just off the top of my head, I think it was Toyota that came up with it. I may be wrong on who, but it was about it got its start with a oil leak. on a machine, and I believe the bearings would go out on this machine, and they'd have to shut down the machine and replace the bearings. Well, somebody's like, well, why do the bearings go out? Well, because the oil's leaking out. Well, why is the oil leaking out? Well, because there's bushing or there's whatever. And they just kept going down till they found out, well, it's because this thing is vibrating or whatever it was, and we need to fix this. It has nothing to do with this machine or nothing to do with the bearing, but you do this, and now the bearings will last twice as long, 5 times as long as whatever it is.
Sure.
So it's just that digging deep, not settling for the simple explanation or the easy explanation that you can just write on your report and hand it in.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that leads me to kind of the next thing I want to talk about, which is like, when it comes to reporting, right? So I think, having those, the reporting metrics and the results and kind of reporting that to your senior leadership, I think
Mhm.
that's one of those things where also a skill, right? I mean,
Mhm.
if people aren't if some people have a format and it's given to them, but I think this is more of a skill that I think ties into the five whys pretty nicely. But what can you tell us about that?
I think anytime you're trying to report or present, really, you have to look at your audience because the audience is going to be able or willing to ingest that information in different ways. If you're talking to senior leadership, you don't want to just throw out like very dry numbers.
Sure.
Put them in charts. Make something colorful, but something that is meaningful that you can use to get across your point, because that's the whole point of metrics is to create that story. If you need to use very dry numbers, then actually make a story out of it. Make even if it's a simple story where you can tell them, "Hey, we were able to reduce vulnerabilities by 50% by doing this and this, by identifying whatever." But make it that story. Make it so that they can connect it and see why it's important and not just throw numbers at them. Um, Recently, I saw that in an email where the email was literally just a bunch of very, very dry percentages, but it didn't really tie together. It didn't really tell any kind of a story. Without that story, you're going to lose your audience.
Well, and I think that's really it, right? I mean, it everything comes down to storytelling and sales, really, right? I mean,
Mhm.
you're always selling something, and if you're selling, and it's just if you're trying to sell somebody just on stats alone, I mean, unless you're selling statisticians, I mean, I don't know who you're going to convince,
Yeah.
to buy, whatever idea or whatever product or whatever anything you're trying to convince them to buy,
Yeah.
right? So they think it really is, comes down to storytelling. And some people get, kind of stop at that storytelling and say it's all about storytelling. And I think that's true. And I think you can stop there. But I tend to see the whole world as no, I think everybody is constantly selling something, right? And if you look for that, if you see that, then it's like, well, how am I going to sell that, right? How am I going to you sell it with stories, and it's not the story that you want to tell. It's the story about what, that they want it, that the other person wants to hear. You can
Hmm.
go back to know your audience, but it's about knowing your audience and telling them a story that they want to hear that's entertaining for them. And then they're like, yeah, that's exactly right. That's why we want to, I don't know, why we want to go to that restaurant tonight. Yeah, that sounds great. Instead
Or
of
increase our cybersecurity budget.
or increase even more importantly, hey, I must be hungry. No, exactly. No, I think that's exactly it. And so, yeah, I think it's easy we tend to be a geeky kind of industry that we like the numbers, the stats, the cool new, toys. But at the end of the day, that those things don't sell senior leadership. They don't care how cool that new AI product is, unless they get to play with it and they find it as cool as we do. But generally, it's going to be the story that either scares them into moving or excites them into moving. But it really is kind of one or the other. There's no in
tie it
between.
to an outcome, right? If you can't tie it to an outcome that will have an effect on that business, positive or negative, it's not going to come across well.
Yep. No, and I think that is well said and about as good as it gets. Bill, I can't thank you enough for coming on today. This has been an absolute blast. But before we go, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you and more about VHC Health?
So they can go to vhchealth.org to find out about the hospital system, some of the exciting things that we're doing there. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me, William O'Connell. I think it's William O'Connell 1 if you do the LinkedIn URL thing. So,
Awesome. Well, Bill, until next time.
all right, appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.